On the war-torn planet of Erythra, Queen Nyxara gazed out over the broken ruins of her once great empire. Her heart was heavy with the ache of a loss that had haunted her for years, the disappearance of her only child, Princess Zorelia. The queen could still remember the day her daughter was taken from her, the dark shadows of a mysterious enemy sweeping across the land in the dead of night. Nyxara had led her soldiers into battle, fought with all her might, but Zorelia was gone. No trace, no sign, no clue as to where she had been taken. All that remained was the echo of a child's laughter and the empty throne room that once held the promise of a new age. Despite years of searching, no progress had been made. She had sent her finest warriors, hired bounty hunters, and used the most advanced technology at her disposal, but Zorelia remained lost to the stars. Yet Nyxara's resolve never wavered. Each night, as the twin moons of Erythra rose above the horizon, she would stand in the highest tower of her palace, staring out into the vast expanse of space, hoping for some sign, some whisper of her daughter's presence. Her longing grew stronger with each passing day. She couldn't allow herself to accept that her child might be gone forever. She refused to believe that. Zorelia was out there somewhere. She had to be. That night, as Nyxara paced the grand hall of her palace, her heart skipping with every whisper of the wind, a sudden beep from the communications console broke her reverie. It was a distress signal coming from a remote sector of the galaxy. A human ship had crash-landed on a barren moon. The signal was faint, barely audible, but it was enough to stir something deep inside the queen. She immediately ordered her fleet to prepare for departure. If there was even the slightest chance that this could be connected to her daughter, she would follow it.as the fleet cruised through the cold silence of space. Nyxara's mind raced. What were the chances that the signal, the crash, the timing, all of it, was just a coincidence? Could it be that her daughter was alive? She had always suspected that humans, with their unpredictable nature and strange ways, had something to do with Zorelia's disappearance. The unknown enemy that had attacked her kingdom those years ago had been human, and ever since that day, she had kept her eyes on their movements. Yet, no matter how many times she searched their worlds, she had found no trace of her child. But now, this signal. Was it possible that the humans had taken Zorelia? Had they been keeping her from her all these years? When the fleet finally arrived at the barren moon, the air was thick with tension. Nyxara could feel it in her bones. This was no ordinary mission. This could be the breakthrough she had been waiting for. Her most trusted lieutenant, Raxay, led a team of elite soldiers down to the crash site. As they landed, they found the human vessel battered and broken, smoke still rising from its wreckage. But there was something odd about the scene. Despite the wreckage, there was no sign of a battle. No bodies, no signs of struggle. It was as if the crash had been deliberately caused. Rax and his team cautiously approached the wreck. As they inspected the area, they found a small, strange object half buried in the sand. It was a pendant, one that Nyxara recognized all too well. It was the very same pendant her daughter had worn on the day she was taken. Her heart skipped a beat. This was no accident. Her daughter's jewelry was here, in the hands of a human, but how? And where was Zorelia? The team continued their search, and then they found something even more shocking. A child, standing alone amidst the wreckage. It was a human boy, no older than 10, holding the pendant tightly in his small hand. His clothes were torn, his face covered in dirt, but there was something in his eyes, a depth, an understanding that made Nyxara's breath catch. How could a human child possess such an expression? How could he have that pendant? Was this the clue she had been looking for? Rax stepped forward, cautiously, and addressed the boy. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice gruff but gentle. The boy didn't answer at first. Instead, he just stared at Raxx, his eyes wide with fear. It took a moment before he spoke, his voice soft and shaky. "I don't know who I am," he said, clutching the pendant tighter. "I only remember the princess. She's my friend. She told me to keep this." The words struck Nyxara like a thunderclap. The princess? The boy knew of Zorelia? How could this be? The boy seemed so ordinary, just a human child, lost and alone. Yet, His connection to her daughter was undeniable. Rex, confused, looked back at Nixara, who stood frozen, her mind reeling with the implications. This boy, this human child, had somehow known Zorelia, or at least remembered her. But how? Why? The queen's instincts told her that this was no coincidence. This child was important. He had a role to play in the puzzle of her daughter's disappearance. The boy, sensing the tension, stepped closer to Nixara. "I know she's out there," he whispered, looking up at the queen with eyes that seemed far too old for his young face. "I've been waiting for her to come back." Nixara's heart pounded in her chest. The boy wasn't just a witness. He wasn't just an innocent bystander. Somehow, he had been part of the story all along. But how? She needed answers. She needed to know what this child knew, what he could remember. ASE, the queen kneeled down to his level. Her voice was steady, yet filled with an urgency she couldn't hide. "Tell me everything you know," she demanded, her voice both soft and commanding. "Tell me about the princess. Where is she? What happened to her?" The boy's gaze softened. "I don't know where she is, but I can feel her. She's alive, and she's waiting for you." Those words, those simple, quiet words, sent a surge of hope rushing through Nixara. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to truly believe that her daughter was still out there, waiting to be found. And the boy, somehow, had the answers she'd been searching for. With new determination, the queen ordered the fleet to prepare to leave. The boy was coming with them. There was no question. He had the key to finding her daughter, and Nixara would stop at nothing to bring Zorelia home. The search had only just begun, but this time, the queen was sure of one thing: the lost cry of her child would not go unanswered. The journey back to the queen's palace was unlike any other Nixara had experienced. The ship, which once felt like a fortress of her command, now felt like a mere shell, its walls vibrating with the intensity of the unknown. The child, Lucas, sat quietly in the corner of the ship, his hands still clutching the pendant of Erythra. His eyes never left the queen for long. He seemed lost in his thoughts, or perhaps in the memories that rushed back to him, memories he couldn't quite understand. Nixara, for her part, watched him with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. This human child, so small and fragile, had somehow woven himself into the very fabric of her lost daughter's story. The queen, who had spent years fighting, scheming, and searching for any trace of her child, couldn't fathom how a human could hold such a deep connection to Zorelia. As the ship cut through the dark expanse of space, the queen's mind drifted to the revelations of the last few hours. The boy had spoken of Zorelia as though she were still alive, like a whisper of something that hadn't been fully forgotten. His words, though fragmented, had stirred a glimmer of hope deep inside her. Could it be true? Was Zorelia out there, alive? Or was this just a cruel trick of fate? The possibilities were endless, but one thing was certain: the search had taken a new, uncharted turn. Nixara turned to her trusted lieutenant, Rex, who had been standing silently at her side for most of the journey. "What do you make of this boy?" she asked, her voice carrying a weight of uncertainty. How could he know so much about Zorelia? Rex, ever loyal, hesitated before responding. "I don't know, Your Majesty. But he's more than just a simple child. There's something in his eyes, something ancient, as though he's seen things that are far beyond his years. I can feel it too, the way he talks about her. It's as if he's been waiting for this moment for a long time." Nixara nodded, her gaze lingering on the boy. She had seen his kind before, lost, abandoned, yet inexplicably determined to find something or someone. But Lucas wasn't just any child. There was an odd familiarity in his presence, a sense that his fate had always been intertwined with Zorelia's. The thought made her uneasy. She needed answers, but she was unsure where to find them. Hours passed in silence as the ship hurtled toward the heart of Erythra's space. The stars outside were mere pinpricks of light, as distant and unreachable as the dreams Nixara had held for so long. As the ship descended into the palace's landing bay, Nixara made a decision. She would not allow her kingdom to remain in the dark about the truth. The time for secrecy had ended. The palace was a place of both awe and power, a towering structure that had once been the center of an empire. But now, it felt like a shell, a reminder of what had been lost. As Nixara walked through its grand halls, Lucas followed closely behind, his small footsteps echoing in the silence. His presence, though subtle, seemed to fill the space with a strange energy. Every so often, the queen would glance at him, catching him staring at her with an intensity that made her heart race. As they entered her private chambers, Nixara motioned for the boy to sit. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Lucas," she began, her voice soft yet firm, "you say you know my daughter, Zorelia. You speak of her as though she is still alive. But I must understand how. What is your connection to her?" Lucas looked at her, his eyes dark and filled with a wisdom that seemed far beyond his years. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've seen her," he said, his hands trembling slightly as he spoke. "Not in person, but in my dreams. I don't know how or why, but it's like she's calling to me. She told me things that don't make sense. But I know she's out there. I know she's waiting for you." Nixara felt a chill run down her spine. The boy's words were strange, unsettling, yet they carried a truth she could not deny. There was something about the way he spoke, the way his voice cracked with emotion, that struck a chord deep within her. Could Zorelia really be alive? Had the girl, her daughter, somehow managed to survive all these years? The thought was almost too much to bear. "And the pendant?" Nixara asked, her voice tight. "How did you come to have it?" Lucas held the pendant out in his small hands, his fingers brushing over the delicate metal. "I don't know," he said quietly. "I've had it for as long as I can remember. My parents, they found me when I was just a baby. I was alone, with nothing but the pendant. They said I was special, that I was meant for something bigger than myself. But I didn't understand what that meant. Not until now." Nixara's heart pounded as she listened. There were too many pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit. A child, raised by human parents, with a connection to her daughter. A pendant that belonged to the royal family of Erythra. The strange dreams of Zorelia calling to him. It was all too much. Too many coincidences. It couldn't all be random. "Do you remember anything else?" Nixara pressed, her voice growing more urgent. "Anything that could help us find her?" Lucas paused, his eyes distant as if searching for something in his mind. "I remember. A place," he said finally. "A dark, cold place. It feels like a prison, but there's a window, and I can see the stars through it. She told me to find her, but I don't know where it is. I only know that it's far from here." Nixara's thoughts raced. A cold, dark place with a view of the stars. It sounded like a prison. The pieces were beginning to fall into place. The humans, the ones who had taken Zorelia all those years ago, had hidden her. They had kept her from her mother, perhaps as part of some twisted plan or experiment. But why? And what did Lucas have to do with it? Rax, who had been silently watching the exchange, spoke up. "Your Majesty," he said cautiously, "I've heard rumors. There are whispers in the human world of a secret facility, one that is off the grid, hidden from all known maps. If this child is speaking the truth, perhaps that is where your daughter is being kept." Nixara's gaze sharpened. The idea of a hidden facility was troubling, but it made sense. The humans had always been secretive, their motives unclear. But now, it seemed they were not only hiding Zorelia, they were keeping her in the most secure place possible. Turning to Lucas, Nixara placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "You've helped me more than you know," she said, her voice softer than before. "I promise you, we will find her. We will bring Zorelia home." Lucas looked up at her, his eyes filled with determination. "I'll help you," he said, his voice steady. "I'll find her. I promised her I would." Nixara nodded, her mind set. The road ahead would be dangerous, but she would not stop until her daughter was in her arms again. The queen and the human child had a shared goal now. And with that promise, the queen knew one thing for certain. Zorelia would not be lost for long. As the days passed, the atmosphere aboard the royal warship grew heavier. Queen Nixara could feel the weight of the task ahead, the urgency pressing down on her like a suffocating force. They had gathered all the intel they could, piecing together the scraps of information that had emerged since Lucas had joined them. The boy, despite his fragile human form, carried a depth of knowledge, a connection to her daughter, Zorelia, that made the queen uneasy yet hopeful. There were too many unanswered questions. Why had this boy been chosen to carry the pendant? What was the true nature of the bond between them? And what secret the humans were hiding that could explain Zorelia's disappearance? Nixara paced the grand observation deck, staring out into the stars. They were nearing the coordinates of the secret facility, a place that, according to their sources, had been shrouded in mystery for years. The whispers that had reached her ears were chilling, rumors of dark experiments and hidden agendas involving the royal bloodline. If the boy's memories were to be trusted, the truth about Zorelia's fate might be more disturbing than she could imagine. Lucas had not spoken much about his past, but one thing was clear: the boy was more than just a lost child. He was deeply connected to Zorelia, almost as if their fates had been intertwined from the very beginning. The queen, still trying to understand how, couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something vital. There had to be more to this story than met the eye. The moment the ship reached the coordinates, the air inside the control room crackled with tension. "We've arrived, Your Majesty," Rax's voice came through the comms, low and controlled. "The facility is just ahead. We'll need to proceed with caution. There's a high probability the humans have set up defenses." Nixara nodded, her hand tightening around the hilt of her sword. "Prepare the team," she commanded. "We move at once." As the team descended onto the surface of the moon, the ground below them was cold and barren, a stark contrast to the shimmering stars above. The facility they had located was nestled within a rocky outcrop, almost invisible unless one knew exactly where to look. The air around them hummed with a strange energy, and for a moment, Nixara thought she could feel something a pull deep within her chest. It was faint, but undeniable, like a tug from across time and space. She glanced at Lucas, who was walking beside her, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. "It's here," the boy whispered, almost to himself, his voice carrying a strange certainty. "This is where she is. I can feel her." Nixara's heart skipped. The connection between them, whatever it was growing stronger with each passing moment. She had seen this before. Royal blood had a unique ability to connect with others, especially those with ties to the same lineage. But this was different. Lucas wasn't Erythron, and yet he seemed to share an inexplicable bond with her daughter. When they reached the entrance of the facility, it was heavily guarded, but Nixara's forces moved swiftly. In a matter of minutes, the outer perimeter was neutralized, and they stood at the threshold of what looked like an underground complex. The walls were cold, metallic, and sterile, a stark reminder of the impersonal world that humans had created. They had come far, but the true challenge awaited them inside. As they moved through the labyrinthine corridors, every step seemed to echo with the promise of answers. There was an unsettling quiet in the air, a silence that felt too controlled, too deliberate. It was as though the very walls were watching them, waiting for something to happen. At last, they reached a large, heavily fortified door. Rax signaled for the team to halt, and Nixara stepped forward. With a sharp motion, she drew her blade and sliced through the security systems, effortlessly disabling them. The door creaked open, revealing a sterile room with an array of monitoring equipment and cold metallic tables. At the far end of the room, a large containment chamber stood, the glass windows fogged by the cold interior. For a moment, Nixara's heart raced. She knew that this was it. This was where Zorelia was being kept. But when she stepped closer, something unexpected happened. Lucas, who had been quiet until now, suddenly stepped forward, his small hands trembling. His eyes locked onto the chamber, and his breath quickened. "She's here," Lucas whispered, his voice barely audible. "I can feel her. She's in there." Nixara's heart leapt in her chest. She stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the containment chamber, and there, standing in the center, was a figure. The figure was cloaked in shadows, but there was no mistaking the familiar silhouette. It was Zorelia. The princess was standing, her back to the glass, her hands pressed against it. For a moment, Nyxara couldn't believe her eyes. It was as though time had stopped. Her daughter was there, alive, but something was wrong. There was a strange, distant look in Zarelia's eyes, a coldness that made Nyxara's heart ache. "Zarelia!" Nyxara called out, her voice trembling with emotion. But the princess didn't respond. She just stood there, unmoving, her gaze fixed on the ground. Lucas stepped forward again, his voice soft but full of urgency. "She doesn't hear you," he said, his words cutting through the silence. "She can't. They've changed her." Nyxara turned to the boy, confusion and fear mixing in her eyes. "What do you mean? What's happened to her?" Lucas hesitated, his gaze shifting to the containment chamber. "The humans did something to her. I don't know how, but they've altered her memories, her mind. She's not the same anymore. But she still remembers you. Deep down, she knows you're here." Nyxara felt a surge of anger rise within her. How could they have done this? How could they have taken her daughter and twisted her in such a way? Her fists clenched at her sides, her mind racing. But even as the fury coursed through her, she felt a deep, unspoken bond with Zarelia. The connection between mother and child was still there, buried beneath whatever changes had been made. In that moment, everything became clear to Nyxara. The boy, Lucas, was no mere coincidence. He had been part of an experiment, yes, but not just any experiment. He had been created to bridge the gap between their worlds, between Erythra and the humans. The pendant he had worn, the strange connection he shared with Zarelia, it was all part of a larger plan, one that had been set in motion long before either of them had known it. Lucas and Zarelia were more than just connected. They were bound by a force older than both of them, a force that the humans had exploited to create something powerful, something unstoppable. Now Nyxara knew what she had to do. She would save Zarelia, not just from the humans, but from the manipulations they had forced upon her. She would restore her daughter, no matter the cost. And with Lucas by her side, she would bring the truth to light. The bond between them, the bond she had never fully understood, was the key. It was time to reclaim what had been stolen from her. With a final, determined look at Zarelia, Nyxara whispered, "We will bring you home, my daughter. No matter what it takes." The cold metallic door slid open with a soft hiss, and a wave of sterile air filled the chamber. Nyxara, her gaze locked on her daughter's still form, could feel her heart racing. It was as if the very air itself was charged with an unseen energy, an energy that threatened to overwhelm her. Zarelia was there, standing just beyond the glass, but the glass itself seemed like an insurmountable barrier. The faint hum of machines in the background seemed to mock the quiet tension in the room. With a decisive motion, Nyxara turned away from the chamber and focused on the task at hand. The facility was more than just a prison. It was a gateway to the human realm, a world of secrecy and danger. If she was going to rescue Zarelia, she would need to venture deeper into the heart of human territory, a place she'd avoided for years. The thought of stepping onto their soil, into their cities, made her skin crawl. But there was no other choice. Zarelia's life was tied to a fate far beyond this facility, and Nyxara knew she had to follow the threads wherever they led. The team was already preparing for their next move. Rax and his soldiers were gathering equipment, securing the transport ship for the journey ahead. They knew it was not going to be easy. The humans had set up elaborate defenses around their realm, and even a royal army like theirs would struggle to breach them. But Nyxara wasn't going to let anything stop her. The bond between her and Zarelia was too strong, and the connection with Lucas, the boy who had proven to be far more than an innocent child, was too important. Together, they would navigate this unknown and dangerous world. As Nyxara approached the ship, her thoughts turned to Lucas. The boy had been quiet for the past few hours, his eyes distant and full of confusion. She could see the weight of the journey taking its toll on him. He had been thrust into a world of unknowns, far beyond the quiet life he had once known. And now, he was being pulled into a conflict he had no way of understanding. But his connection to Zarelia, the strange bond they shared, was too powerful to ignore. He had a role to play in this, and it was one that would lead them into the heart of human territory. As the ship lifted off from the barren moon's surface, the finality of their departure hit Nyxara with a force she hadn't expected. She had always known that the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but now, as the ship's engines hummed in the background and the stars stretched out before them, the weight of the unknown pressed down on her shoulders. The human realm was vast, and they were about to step into a world far more complex and treacherous than anything she had ever encountered. The journey through space was long and silent. The stars outside their windows were mere pinpricks in the vastness of the universe. Nyxara could feel her thoughts swirling around her like a storm. How had the humans managed to create such an elaborate web of deception? How had they taken her daughter, hidden her so deeply, and manipulated her in ways that Nyxara could only begin to understand? She clenched her fists, the anger rising within her. But there was no time for anger, not now. They were getting closer to the human world, and every second brought them nearer to the truth. As the ship approached the human realm, the sensors began to ping, warning of the highly advanced security systems surrounding the planet. Nyxara knew they would have to be careful. The humans were known for their technological prowess, and their defenses would be formidable. It wasn't just about brute strength. The humans had a different kind of power, one that was hidden in their machines, in their politics, in their very way of life. Nyxara had learned to respect their methods, but she had never trusted them. Now, as they neared the atmosphere of the human world, her unease grew. The ship entered the atmosphere, and the view of the human cities below was overwhelming. From space, the planet seemed like a living thing alive with light, movement, and energy. The cities sprawled out across the surface, their towering structures reaching toward the heavens. But beneath that beauty, Nyxara could feel the cold, mechanized heart of it all. This was a world of control, of manipulation, where emotions were buried beneath layers of technology and society. And it was in this world that her daughter was being held. The ship descended toward a remote human settlement. Rax had found a hidden location, a place far from the main cities, where they could make a landing without drawing too much attention. As the ship touched down, Nyxara's heart beat faster. This was it. They had entered the human realm, and there was no turning back. They quickly disembarked, their boots crunching on the dirt ground as they moved swiftly into the shadow of the dense forest surrounding the settlement. Nyxara's senses were heightened. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of every decision hanging over them. But there was no time for hesitation. Every step they took brought them closer to Zorelia. Lucas, who had been quiet for most of the journey, was suddenly alert. His eyes scanned the surroundings, and for the first time, he seemed completely at ease in the strange environment. He had never been to this world before, but there was something about it that seemed familiar to him. Something that connected him to Zorelia's fate in ways he hadn't yet fully understood. He turned to Nyxara, his voice quiet but certain. "We need to go this way," he said, pointing toward a narrow path that led deeper into the forest. Nyxara nodded, trusting him despite her doubts. The boy had led them this far, and his instincts were sharper than any they had. The path was hidden, overgrown with thick vines and foliage. But there was a sense of urgency in Lucas's movements, as if he knew exactly where they needed to go. They moved quickly, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the thick underbrush. The deeper they went into the forest, the more Nyxara could feel the presence of the humans. Their influence was everywhere. The air smelled faintly of chemicals, and the occasional distant hum of machinery vibrated through the ground beneath them. It was as if the entire forest was an extension of the human world, a place where nature and technology had been forced into uneasy harmony. As they reached the clearing at the heart of the forest, they found a small, hidden compound. It was protected by high-tech security systems, the likes of which Nyxara had never seen before. The humans had covered their tracks well, but they hadn't anticipated the tenacity of an Erythran queen. She motioned for her team to take cover, and they began to disable the security systems. It would take time, but they had no choice. Lucas stepped forward, his voice low. "This is it," he said. "She's in there." Nyxara's gaze hardened. She could feel the presence of her daughter now, faint but undeniable. The bond between them was pulsing like a beacon, guiding her. Zorelia was close. Closer than she had ever been in years. "We're almost there," Nyxara whispered to herself. We're almost home. The air was thick with tension as Nixara and her team stood before the hidden compound. The faint hum of machinery echoed in the distance, a constant reminder of the humans' reach and control over the land. The cold, mechanical heart of their empire pulsed around them, sending shivers down Nixara's spine. She could feel the pull of the connection to Zorelia, growing stronger with every step she took toward the compound. There was no turning back now. They had come this far, and nothing, no human force, no hidden technology would stand in her way. Lucas stood silently by her side, his eyes fixed on the building in front of them. His face was set, his expression unreadable, but Nixara could sense the weight of the moment on him. This place, this world, it was as unfamiliar to him as it was to her, yet he had become her most trusted ally. His bond with Zorelia had led them here, and now it would be the key to their victory. "Rax," Nixara said in a low voice, her command cutting through the quiet of the forest. "We'll need to disable their outer defenses. I want a clean entry. No alarms, no surprises." Rax nodded, his eyes sharp with focus. "Understood, Your Majesty. We'll handle it." The team moved quickly, efficiently. As Raxex and his soldiers worked to disable the security systems, Nixara allowed herself a moment of reflection. She had spent years searching for Zorelia, for answers, and now, standing on the precipice of the truth, she couldn't help but feel a mix of anger, hope, and fear. She had always known the humans were capable of incredible things, but to see how deeply they had infiltrated her people, how they had twisted her daughter's fate, this was something else entirely. It was a betrayal that went beyond anything she could have imagined. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Rax gave a sharp nod. "We're in. The perimeter's clear." Nixara took a deep breath and moved forward, her boots crunching against the dirt as she led her team through the now unsecured gate. The compound loomed ahead, its dark, looming walls seeming to close in around them. As they approached the entrance, the metallic doors slid open with an eerie quietness, revealing the sterile, cold interior. It was like stepping into another world, one that felt completely disconnected from the life Nixara knew. The hum of technology filled the air, and overhead, strange lights flickered, casting long shadows that stretched across the hallway like specters. The place had an otherworldly feel, as if the human presence here was not just physical, but something deeper, more insidious. Nixara's heart raced as she led the way through the maze-like corridors. Her instincts, honed by years of leadership and combat, kept her senses sharp. Every step was calculated, every sound analyzed. But even with all her preparation, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the heart of a trap. The humans were cunning, and they had planned this far better than she could have imagined. As they moved deeper into the compound, Lucas suddenly stopped. He turned to Nixara, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear. "It's close," he whispered. "I can feel her. Zorelia. But something's wrong." Nixara's gaze narrowed. The boy had always been sensitive to the connection between him and her daughter, but now there was a tremor in his voice that didn't sit well with her. "What do you mean?" she asked, stepping closer. "It's like she's trapped," Lucas said, his voice faltering. "Not just physically, but mentally. They've done something to her. I don't think she's fully aware of herself." The realization hit Nixara like a punch to the chest. It was worse than she had feared. The humans had not only imprisoned Zorelia, they had torn apart the very essence of who she was, shaping her into something else, something they could control. Nixara clenched her fists, a surge of anger flooding her body. Her daughter, her flesh and blood, had been twisted and broken by these humans, and she would make them pay for it. "Stay close," Nixara ordered. "We're going to get her back." They continued forward, their footsteps echoing through the hallways. The air grew heavier with each passing moment, the tension building until it was almost unbearable. Finally, they reached a large chamber at the end of the hallway. Through the thick, reinforced glass, Nixara could see Zorelia. Her daughter stood in the center of the room, her back turned to them, her hands pressed against a cold, transparent barrier that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Zorelia's face was emotionless, her eyes blank. Nixara's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't the daughter she remembered. The woman before her was a shadow of the vibrant, powerful princess she had once known. "She's in there," Lucas said softly, his voice full of sorrow. "But it's like she's not really there anymore." Nixara's heart ached, but she pushed the feeling aside. This wasn't the time for weakness. She needed to act. "Prepare to breach the barrier," she ordered, turning to her team. Rax and his soldiers moved quickly, positioning themselves near the edges of the chamber. The queen stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Zorelia. She had to get through to her daughter, had to remind her who she was. The bond between them was there, faint but still alive, and Nixara could feel it pulling at her, urging her to reach out. With a steady hand, Nixara placed her palm against the glass, her voice barely a whisper. "Zorelia," she called. "It's me. Your mother. I'm here." For a moment, nothing happened. Zorelia remained motionless, her eyes locked onto the floor. But then, a flicker of recognition passed over her face. Her hand twitched, as if she were fighting to break free of some unseen force. "Zorelia, please," Nixara said, her voice filled with desperation. "Don't you remember? We're family. We're connected. You're not alone. I'm here." A shudder ran through Zorelia's body, and for the briefest of moments, her eyes met her mother's. There was something there, something familiar, something that had survived despite the humans' manipulations. The bond, the love, the memories of a mother and daughter was still there. "Mother," Zorelia whispered, her voice weak, as if the words were fighting their way out from a distant place within her. Nixara's heart soared. She reached out, her hand pressing against the glass with more urgency now. "I'm here, Zorelia. We're going to get you out of here. You're going to be free." But before Nixara could do anything else, the room shook. The lights flickered, and an alarm blared, echoing throughout the compound. The humans had found them. The final confrontation was upon them, and there would be no turning back.